So thank you for coming to, I think this might be the last installment of the speaker series before the summer. We're so glad you're here to join us and talk about Pride. And we have two awesome professionals from Biogen that are going to share their experiences in just a moment. So let me advance the slide. So a little bit of background before we get into this. So this is kind of dually presented by Biogen and the Community Lab and the Lemelson MIT program. So a little bit about the Community Lab. We're a really cool organization. Well, I think they're really cool because I work with us, right? We're a really cool organization where, you know, traditionally in times before COVID, you would come in, you put the lab coat safety glasses on, and you could do a lot of hands-on science experiments with us. And this is a really cool way to kind of get students engaged and kind of get, you know, that curiosity peaked. And during COVID, we have a lot of really cool online presentations and lab simulations and things that we've been doing, including this program. One of the many things we've been able to do since going virtual and everyone being on Zoom. Then a little bit about the Lemelson MIT program. So they were founded almost 30 years ago. So they're kind of they're a little bit older than the Community Lab. We were founded, I think, 2002. I forgot to mention that part. But they kind of work with the MIT's School of Engineering, and they really focus on getting young people excited about the field of engineering. So we work more with the biotech, they work more with the engineering, and we kind of came together to make this really awesome program. They've seen about 3,200 students since opening and about 500 educators each year. So it's really cool to work with them and to kind of have this this presentation. So join with me. We'll go back to the first slide so you can see their pictures. Is Kim Wolfram and Lindsay Copley. Hopefully I pronounced those correctly. And Kim is the Senior Director and Head of Global, and I try not to butcher these, Reg CMC Biologics and Gene Therapy. So I don't entirely know what that is, which is gonna be really cool to hear about this stuff. And Lindsay is the Engineering 2 and the Plant Engineering. So we're gonna hear a lot of really cool things about what they do at Biogen and their different experiences that they've had. So it's gonna be really exciting. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this off to Kim. Just let me know when you want me to advance.
All right, sounds good. And thanks for reminding me again about the animation. So hello, everyone. Welcome to this really exciting event, and happy Pride to everyone. It's really great to have this celebration of Pride connected to STEM and Community Lab, some of my favorite things. So this is super exciting. Also very excited to have Lindsay here, my friend and also my partner in a lot of our efforts in Reach Out. So today I'm going to share a little bit about my career journey, and then I'll pass it over to Lindsay, and then certainly welcome questions from all of you. So please engage in chat and feel free to log your questions, and we'll come back to that. So my career journey started in a fairly interesting way, shall we say. You know, I really love your pronunciation, Connor, Reg. I'm going to go with Reg, I think, from now on. We call it Reg, but I like Reg better, actually. It's cooler sounding, and maybe Reggie or something could be our nickname too, which is awesome. But you know, when I was younger, my career aspiration was actually to be the first woman on the Boston Celtics. And of course, you know, from going from a place of wanting to be on the Boston Celtics to, you know, regulatory affairs or reg affairs, you know, there's, you know, obviously not a very sort of clear and not a sort of, it took a couple of turns. So I'm going to go through those with you today. If you could advance, please. So this is a picture of me. Unfortunately, for my parents who tried to convince me otherwise, I only wore Celtics clothes to school for about 5 years. And, you know, my school pictures included. I think there was particular sort of negotiations on school picture days to try to maybe think about something other than my Boston Celtics clothes. But no, I would wear my Boston Celtics clothes. Sometimes it would involve even, and I'm really sort of putting myself out there here, sweatpants with shorts over them, just to really show my pride. So I was really quite, you know, quite interesting as a kid, of course. And you know, as you can click through the slide, my current one more, I think, as well, and maybe just click through it all together. I think that's, oh, sorry. So now, as Connor mentioned, my current role is in global regulatory affairs here at Biogen, and I've recently had a 15-year mark, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about how I went from this sort of interesting kiddo who wore Boston Celtics clothes every day into reg affairs. So please advance. So I grew up in Western Massachusetts, not too far from where I live now, but culturally fairly different. My family was working class, sort of a blue collar family. My father worked in a factory. My mom is a teacher. Many of my family members are teachers and nurses. And I'm the oldest child of my family. I have sort of some family members, some stepsisters and brothers. And my parents did separate when I was younger, and I did live with my father and my mother, and also spent a fair amount of time with my grandparents. So my grandmother is pictured there near Maya Angelou. She may actually be calling in today. She's kind of my biggest fan, and she was a big part in getting me to where I am today. So, as a young person, I increasingly sort of express myself as this gender non-binary person. And, I can remember certain moments where people would sort of ask me point blank, like, what are you? Or some of my experiences of going to the restroom and basically being told I'm in the wrong restroom. Hey, little boy, the boys' bathroom is over there, and sort of being like, oh, um, I that didn't even occur to me. But in some ways, those were like clear reminders about maybe some differences that I was having, and how the world was sort of accepting me. I've always been really inspired by people who push boundaries, who essentially do things for the first time. So when I would say to people, I want to be the first woman on the Celtics, and people would say, you can't do that. You're a woman. What the heck? I used to love that, actually. I used to be like, awesome. Now I get to like kind of prove this person wrong, and they're gonna, I'm not gonna give them tickets when I'm, on the team or something. But there was always this sort of incentive, and I was really inspired by people. They're pictured here, the first woman on the Harlem Globetrotters, the first African American or Black man in space. I was always really inspired by these people who were the first, and really pushed boundaries, and were pioneers. I also like people who are a bit different, whether it was beat poetry or Nostradamus. I kind of had this sort of interest as a young person in these kind of things, just to kind of learn more about who I am, and kind of the world around me. When I was a young person, as you can imagine, with Boston Celtics clothes, I didn't have like a ton of social friends. My closest friend was Courtney, and Courtney had cerebral palsy, and Courtney and I would hang out at recess. Unfortunately for Courtney, it involved often watching me play basketball, but outside of that, we did find a lot of time together, and I came to know her, and her great personality, and also her sense of humor, which I still remember. Unfortunately, she passed away when I was in the 4th grade, and during that time, I also experienced the loss of my uncle to pancreatic cancer. And of course, as a 4th grader, you're kind of grappling with these things. And I remember wanting to spend time in the hospital, despite how sad, of course, it was, and feeling this real commitment to the patient in terms of understanding and caring for him, and making sure that his dignity was preserved, and sort of who he was. And this is something that really stuck with me as I thought about what I wanted to be essentially when I grew up, maybe looking at contingency plans to being the first woman on the Celtics. So it kind of then turned into wanting to be a physician or a doctor. And I went to St. Anselm College, where I studied biology. Um, and while I was there, I increasingly took coursework outside of biology, as well as it is a liberal arts school, and with some requirements in the humanities, language, philosophy, religion, sociology, psychology. And that coursework kind of just opened my mind to kind of think about my love for science, but also sort of critical thought, and some of these other subjects which I really grew to love. And when I graduated, I was like, maybe I want to go to law school instead of, being a physician. And I was kind of, sort of debating what my next step was. And, upon graduating, I actually took a job in the factory, which, again, is something that my family had familiarity with during the day. Or excuse me, I worked at night so that during the day I could interview for jobs. And I was very fortunate to actually get a job at Abbott Labs or AbbVie in Worcester. And, that was just an incredible experience. I was hired as a temp and eventually, was hired as a full-time colleague. Pretty soon after arriving, FDA showed up for a prior approval inspection, or they inspect the sites for manufacturing, and Humira was being manufactured. So I just so happened to sort of be there while this like major product was being reviewed and approved, and it was really such a cool opportunity to be sort of witness to that and also participate. As sort of being sort of an entry-level person, there was no tasks that I wasn't willing to do, but some of those tasks allowed me to actually sit in the audit room to be a runner or to take notes for people, and I got to learn a lot through that experience. While I was at AbbVie or Abbott Labs at the time, I went to graduate school to study regulatory policy or regulatory affairs and health policy at the Mass College of Pharmacy. It was a tough time because you were working pretty long days and then doing work, driving into Boston at night and doing that coursework. But through that, I got to meet a lot of people that were also in industry and in the field of regulatory affairs. And one of those people, 15 years ago, took a chance on me and hired me into Biogen. I remember my first day on the job. It was, of course, eventful. I had spent the previous weekend in Provincetown. It was around Memorial Day, which is kind of a common weekend for LGBTQ community to be in Provincetown, for those of you who may know. And my glasses broke in a very tragic dancing accident. I mean, I won't go into details, but essentially I stepped on them. And so I had to arrive in my first day of work without glasses, and my picture has from 15 years ago has a pair of like fake glasses, essentially is what I'm wearing. Don't tell anyone, or now this is recorded so other people may know. But there's, I always kind of look at that picture and chuckle. And then the other memorable thing that happened my first day, I was traveling in because I was living in Gardner, Massachusetts at the time, and traveling into Cambridge, and my commuter rail train caught on fire. So it was like, so I had to exit the train or whatever. And then I was thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're totally going to fire me because I'm late for like my first day of work, of course. And who's going to believe that like my train caught on fire? So I will always remember that first day. But outside of those exciting things, some of the things I totally remember are being greeted by a couple of people who I'm still very close to, actually. And they were so understanding and empathetic. And I was like, wow, they just made me feel really good. Although I was kind of showing up in my fake glasses with a train being on fire. So it was such a cool experience. When I joined again, I was in regulatory. I was a senior associate, which essentially is kind of the lowest level within our team. And as a result of that, I got to work on a lot of projects, many of which I got to see through from sort of the earliest stages of the clinic, where you're sort of introducing the product into the clinic for its use, through the approval. And that is just such a cool experience. I'll get into what my job actually is in a little bit of time, but during this time here at Biogen, I also started to become more comfortable about who I was. So essentially, I wasn't really out at my previous job, and there was so much good work. Some of the people, I think Roger, I saw you on the call. Some of these real reach out pioneers and reach out as a community of people within Biogen who support the LGBTQ and allies community. And they were doing incredible work to kind of really advocate on behalf of the community, whether it's to do with marriage rights or tax benefits for domestic partners. And I remember thinking like, wow, like this is benefiting me. This makes me feel like a part of a community. I am so fortunate. And it allowed me to feel more confident to say, oh yeah, I'm going on a date with a girl, rather than sort of like masking pronouns or just kind of avoiding the conversation altogether. And of course, that just takes a lot of work. So it felt pretty freeing to kind of just kind of be more out at work. And I'm forever grateful for Roger, for Paula, and many others for the work that they did that directly impacted my life, and is a big part why I'm so active within the Reach Out team today as global co-chair and with Lindsay and Erica. So essentially, you know, this role has been super exciting within Biogen. There's been a lot of successes. There's been some big challenges for sure. And you know, in terms of you know, as I think about career advice, obviously, you know, a big part of you know how I think about these things anyway, and I have the benefit of having several people on my team, and I love working with people on career development and thinking about that. But it's really important to think about what your passions are, what your gifts are, what are these unique things that sort of make you you. You know, and I do believe that every single person has gifts and strengths and really great things about them. And also, what are you passionate about, and especially grounding those passions in a way to try to make other people's lives better. I think that type of motivation, as I think about it, is so motivational, obviously, to get you through some of the tougher times. Um, and you know, pictured here is my wife and my daughter. I have a couple pictures of my daughter. I'm pretty commonly, I think this is a common thing for parents, but I'm constantly showing people pictures of my daughter, whether or not they want to see it or not. But you know, there were times that I wasn't so sure if I would have a family, and you know, being able to find a partner and sort of have the family, and these are things that I never take for granted in terms of that, in terms of the sort of good fortune that I've had in terms of the work that I've been able to be a part of at Biogen, and then the family support, including from my grandmother again and my parents and my sister and broader family. So I think I'll kind of close out, you know, with 2 points. One, you know, regardless of the struggles or things that I've experienced, you know, I've definitely become more aware as well that I have so much privilege and immeasurable privilege, really, and just sort of the responsibility to act on that privilege with regards to how to speak out. So a lot of what we're focused on right now is speaking out and protecting the rights of trans children or teens, especially with regards to access to healthcare. There's some really discriminatory legislation out there on the national level that really calls into question and really is quite terrible, plainly. And then, you know, there is the opportunity, obviously, to think about our work in terms of intersectionality and speaking out against racism at those opportunities, and how does one use our privilege in order to do that? And also, what does allyship look like? What does you know, not centering oneself, but really creating a place for other voices to be heard. So we do spend a fair amount of time thinking about equity, whether it's in the health equity space or you know, in other settings. So if you go to the next slide, this is just the closing. I think in terms of, sorry, there's a ton of animations. I feel free to click through all of them. And as Connor's clicking through them, these are just the other health authorities that we interact with. I think most people, as I describe these things, assume, you know, I work with the FDA. And again, what I do is a bit hard to sort of describe, but there's a lot of scientists and engineers, some of whom are on the call today, Valerie Sang being one of them, who I'm so fortunate in to work with, because I get to learn from them. And a big part of my interaction with the health authority is how the drug is made, tested, and how it's basically supplied to or delivered to patients. So it's definitely a very cool experience, and I consider one of my real happiest moments too are the travels that I get to do globally. I get to meet people. I get to learn more about different cultures, different experiences. And through that, of course, I get to learn more about myself. So I will now probably, you know, kind of conclude. I think we'll have time for questions after. And, you know, I'm so proud to pass this off to Lindsay, a great leader within our team. And again, as I shared, a friend. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. That was awesome. And I can't believe I messed up the reg CMC. Like I literally saw regulatory on the next slide and I like should have gotten that one, but I think reg does sound cooler. So we'll go
Oh,
with that
it's
one for now.
totally cooler, definitely.
But thank you, Kim. And without further ado, we will pass it off to Lindsay. So Lindsay, the floor is yours when I get the slide to, oh, come on. There it is.
Hi, thank you, Kim, so much. I learned a lot about you just then, and it makes me really happy. So my name is Lindsay. I am an engineer too, within the plant engineering space right now. I grew up in a very, very small town in Southwest Missouri. I think I graduated with like 60 other people. So it was one of those towns where like everybody knew everybody. You played the same sports teams with like the same people on everything. And when I was in high school, I knew that I really liked agriculture. Like I grew up on a farm, and so I showed cows. My parents still have cows back in Missouri. Um, I mean, in fact, I went home this last Christmas and my dad was like, I need you to help me work cows and like give them shots. And so that's kind of like, that's how I grew up. And then when I think I was a freshman in high school, I went to an all girls engineering camp it's the University of Missouri Science and Technology. And we spent like 4 days there and we did a whole bunch of like, we had to build a shoe out of paper and super glue that like you were able to walk in. And then we had like many other projects. And that's when I really realized that, hey, I think I want to be an engineer. This is really cool. So I started doing some research and I was like, okay, I love agriculture. I love engineering. I was like, well, I know that I want to do that, but like, what school can I go to? Um, and so I decided to start at a community college, and I have an Associates of Science of Pre-Engineering. So I was able to get my calculus, my physics, my statics, all of those basic classes out of the way. And then I transferred to the University of Arkansas, where I finished my degree it's a biological agricultural engineering degree. And as I was going through school, I was like, I want to go help farmers. I want to make the world more sustainable. This is going to be great. Solar power, wind energy, all of those fun things. And then my senior year, I started applying to jobs. And as I was applying, at first I wanted to stay close to home. I wanted to be in Southwest Missouri. And I realized, like, what's keeping me here? Like why? And so I just started expanding and I just started applying on the East Coast and on the West Coast. And when I looked at the job description for Biogen, I was like, wow, I'm like looking at all these things and I'm like, I can do that. I can do that. I know how pumps work. I know how pipes work, like all of those things. And so I actually applied for it and they called me and they flew me to North Carolina to interview. And then they flew me home that night and it was crazy. But the next day, they gave me an offer and they offered me a position in an engineering rotational program. So I have spent the last 3.5 years rotating between different sections in our engineering group. So I started in plant engineering, which is working with like the water, air, steam, things that are keeping the plant running. Then I moved over to process engineering, and our process engineering is where we're working with the bioreactors, the perfusion skids, the chromatography columns, and that's where like the product is actually made. And so as the engineer, you own that equipment and you make sure that it continues to run. And if something breaks, you are the first person that gets called. And so then last year I spent the entire year in automation, and that's working with like the automation that's actually controlling the process equipment. So it took me 3.5 years to get through the program, and I was able to kind of steer the program the way that I wanted to. So when I first started, it was like, oh, you're going to spend 6 months in each group. Well, obviously that didn't happen. I ended up being in plant utilities for a little longer. So then I wanted to be in process a little longer. And then our plant went through a shutdown and I got to extend that a little more, which was awesome. I learned so much. And actually in May, so like I've been in my position now for a month and I got to pick which group I wanted to go into. And plant utilities had a role that was open. And so I took it. And right now I am the responsible engineer for our water systems, for the glycol system, for clean steam, clean air, all of the utilities that are in our lab building. So basically I get to make sure that all of those are running. And if something breaks, it, I get the first call. So, as I was listening to Kim, I was like actually writing some things down about myself and like thinking back to some of the things that I like that happened to me as I was growing up. So pictured here is my partner. That's Lisa, and in our spare time we love to go fishing. And so that's a picture of us. We're out on the pier, and that day we actually spent 10 hours fishing. We fished until like 3 a.m. and it was amazing. But I remember when I came out to my mom and I told my mom that I was gay, and she was like, you're too pretty, you're too girly, like you're not gay. And I'm like, well, that doesn't mean anything, Mom. And of course now like my mom is super accepting and she loves me and all of that, and both my parents do. But it was that stereotype that my mom saw in her head that like really doesn't exist. And my partner actually works at Biogen here, and we like to joke that we're the gayest people on campus. We actually both took pictures in front of our rainbow flag that we fly here at Biogen during the month of June. We have 2 puppies. The black one there, her name is Millie. She's 7. And then we have Finley with his little tongue out. He's 1.5 years. And they are our lives. We take them everywhere with us. This other picture here, this is some pumps and pipes, and this is not a picture of Biogen, but this is like, if you were to walk in our utility space, that's exactly what it looks like. I deal with a lot of big equipment. I tend to get dirty. I come home with like dirt on my knees because I'm like crawling around on the floor doing stuff all the time. So I did recently, I applied to graduate school and I was able to get into Johns Hopkins, and I start my master's degree in August, which I'm really excited about. So that's really all that I had to share about myself. So I'm really excited to hear everyone's questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. And we already just got, I can't speak today. I need coffee or something. We just got our first great question in the chat. So I will read that to the 2 of you and you guys can go ahead and give the answer. So Isabella asks, how do you battle with those stereotypes, the ones relating to gender presentation and individuals not believing the validity of your sexuality?
I'll start. So for me, I just make sure that I feel comfortable with myself. I had somebody tell me one time to look in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you. I love you. I love you. And that, like, I as long as I'm comfortable with myself, what everyone else says, thinks, does, it really doesn't matter. And I do realize, so working at Biogen, I am able to be 100% open and honest, and I get to come to work as my whole self. My whole group knows that I'm in a relationship with a female. And so that's helpful. But it's really about, for me, it's about how you feel about yourself and just making sure that you're comfortable with yourself.
Yeah, I think you really captured it so well, Lindsay, in terms of, this comfort with ourselves, and then through the active visibility as well, like, and the visibility of varying gender expressions, right? And sort of, having more familiarity with that. I think that's important. And again, there's a lot of bravery associated, especially when, gender and sexual identities are quite embedded early. They can be cultural. Sometimes I'm reminded of that as I travel it to different places, whether in the US or outside of the US, where, I feel comfortable maybe in Massachusetts, and then, sort of reminded about some of those differences. But I love what Lindsay said in terms of, how do you find this place to be comfortable about who you are, and really how people define you, um, it is not as important, obviously, in terms of how one defines oneself, right? And especially as one is maybe thinking about their identity, or maybe feeling the pressure to sort of choose this identity over that one, or whatever it might be, and maybe just the comfort of just, again, being who you are, throughout that is super important. And obviously the support systems in order to achieve that are very important.
Awesome. Thank you both for that. And then everyone, feel free to put as many questions in the chat as you want. We'll make sure we try to get to every single one of them. But while we have these periods where there's no questions in the chat, I have a couple that I've kind of prepared. And I can kind of get the conversation started. Oh my goodness, I need coffee, I swear. So kind of piggybacking off of like facing that battle of the stereotypes, were there any challenges, any notable challenges that either of you faced kind of getting into the field of biotech or in STEM in general? It could be any kind of challenge that you faced.
I mean, you want to go ahead, Lindsay, and start us up?
Oh, sure. So I don't know about specifically like getting into biotech, but I can talk about coming out to my team. Like I work with like engineering is a very male dominated industry to begin with, but I work like I joke sometimes and I'm like, I think I'm the only female on this floor. And this building is huge. So I remember when I first started at Biogen, I was so scared to like tell people that I was gay. And I actually had one of my peers tell me not to tell anybody. They were like, keep that a secret, don't tell anybody. And that was extremely hard for me for a while. But one day at lunch, I just decided to tell the guys that I work with. And they were just like, okay, cool. Like they literally did not even like bat an eye. They were just like, all right, like, and that was it. And I don't know, like it just makes me so thankful that Biogen is such a progressive company to work for.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay, for sharing that. And yeah, I don't think I faced challenges. I mean, I think some of the challenges may have been, some of the self-doubt, that I was experiencing. I think sometimes people call it imposter syndrome and other things, but in other ways, if you are maybe, part of a community that may not be sort of the normalized community, shall we say, like you kind of inherently sort of pick up on this idea that you may be sort of not like everyone else, and like being comfortable with that, especially as like an early career professional when you kind of have a lot of that anyway. And again, all of this energy that you might be spending, trying to mask like who you are, or maybe conform, or whatever that might be, and of course the privilege that's associated even with being able to do that. But this kind of drives my advocacy in terms of like, hey, I think we can just unlock a lot of potential and energy from great people, if we can allow them to not have to kind of run those masks, or other ways of not feeling comfortable to express oneself, is super important. And of course, we have a long ways to go in certain domains there. So, but that experience certainly sort of tuned me into that. I mean, I think there was like a lot of, I remember when I was early in my career, I think it was like the only single person, never mind, like, so there was a lot of like offers to like match make, and obviously it wasn't exactly what I had in mind, but you're kind of like, oh yeah, he seems like a great guy, but I'm not really interested, or something. And just sort of like, well-meaning sort of gestures. But just kind of like how even those small acts can sometimes be misaligned in a way that, just maybe took some energy to try to, overcome to some degree.
Awesome, thank you. It looks like Laura asked the question, what have you done to help the LGBTQ community to integrate into your work and in general?
You want me to start, Lindsay?
Yeah.
All right, so this is an opportunity to kind of brag about Reach Out a little bit, which, I know some of our Reach Out team members are here. And again, we owe so much credit to the founders of Reach Out. I think we're just kind of carrying the sort of baton, since it started. But, a big part of how we think about this work is how to support not only our team members globally, and support may look like providing resources, like if people have questions, and some of the questions that we do have are from parents who may say, hey, my child is coming to me with some of these questions and I don't quite know how to answer them. Or hey, what type of resources are available. So obviously focusing on that and our and sort of this family focus is very important to us. Also, this allyship and intersectionality, how we partner with our other employee resource networks here at Biogen, who are doing great work, to advocate for the rights of, whether it's disability rights, obviously in terms of important advances that need to be done to remove racial, sort of systematic racism. There's so much work there, and how can our Reach Out work really kind of partner with that to amplify and to support. As we think about patients and healthcare, obviously that's the business that we do. So there's this intersection in terms of health equity, to understanding maybe the unique needs of an LGBTQ plus community with regards to even basic conversations. I mean, I can't tell you how many weird conversations I've had at the physician's office, sort of assuming my sexual identity, and, that's just the start. Never mind maybe if there's unique needs with regards to the community, with regards to health, and there's a lot of progress to be made there, not only within this, again, as you look across. This partnership with universities and with education is part of STEM, and also in terms of our advocacy and taking a stand with regards to policy, and that's one of the things I'm so proud of Biogen. Like we've really taken a stand on some issues in our past, to protect the rights of the LGBTQ community, and I will forever be grateful for those acts of advocacy. Lindsay, what's on your mind about this work?
So something that Kim and I have to be really cognizant of is that each region that we have an office in, they have vastly different needs. I mean, like for example, in Boston is a little bit more progressive than the North Carolina area. So something that we've done in North Carolina is education, like holding lunch and learns. We had an individual come in from the LGBTQ Center of Raleigh and talk about being gender non-binary, and just opening that conversation so that people can like learn and ask questions. We have a panel discussion happening later this week about how to be an ally and giving resources to parents. I'm also working on, as Kim said, something that like working with the patients. It was brought to our attention that one of our intake forms only had male and female on it. And so we're working right now to get that changed to make sure that we have gender non-binary options so that everyone can feel comfortable.
That's awesome. And appreciate everyone in the chat for the good questions so far. And keep them coming if you have any more. But no, that was awesome. Thank you so much for that. It's great to hear about all the cool things that Biogen's doing. Definitely Ooh, my mic cut out. Definitely some things that, you know, there's more things that I'm made aware of each day, which is also just kind of great. Looks like Laura asked again, what would you say is the best way to support your LGBTQ family and friends?
I'll take a start, and then, you know, there's always things that come to mind, and I'm welcome, you know, further discussion on this, shall we say, and you know, for all involved. And you know, as I think back to those moments that were, you know, really quite impactful, I think, you know, the ability to kind of be vulnerable about oneself, especially in those like early days where maybe you do have some fear in terms of how one might receive you based on, you know, whether it's your gender or your sexual identity, sort of, you know, it's just that place to have a non-judgmental and loving and caring and environment in order to kind of just express things. And I think sometimes, as you know, as even I'm doing this for colleagues, you know, or friends that may be outside of my direct experience, even, I do not have all the answers, and you know, maybe it's an opportunity for partnership with regards to let's see where we can find the answers, or also finding ways to ask questions like, what does support for you look like? Being very direct around that, maybe without making assumptions or looking for solutions, and being able to have those kind of open and caring conversations makes sense. I think with the pandemic, you know, one of the things that come to mind too is the sort of isolation and the concern that I have for maybe young people as they're sort of grappling with this without social sort of support structures, right? And there are some online communities that have formed, and finding communities, right, where you don't feel isolated, you don't feel alone, you feel celebrated for who you are, and those communities do exist. I think Lindsay and I probably have, you know, when you're in those environments, and our reach out team is very much that environment. And you know, it may take some searching, but finding those are important. Or for people you care very much about, perhaps there are ways to find those types of opportunities for them as well. Lindsay, what comes to your mind about this?
Something that came to my mind was just having those conversations, the hard conversations, and like really being an advocate. I had to have a conversation with somebody the other day, and this was outside of Biogen, but they didn't understand the non-binary, like, I mean, the non-binary pronouns really. And so I had a long conversation with them and just explained that, like, it's not made up, it's not an imagination. Like, that was the words that they used, you know, and just like, but I was able to sit this individual down and talk to them and like have an open and real conversation. And then when we both got up, we were like, okay, like they learned something and it was awesome. I really like advocacy is just a huge part.
That's great. It's always great when people can have those open conversations and like just kind of, you know, heart to heart and learn something.
Mhm.
Isabella asked, do you have any recommendations for books, articles, essays, documentaries, etc., to learn more about LGBTQIA+ community, gender, and sexuality, and the history of Pride?
Yeah, this is something we're talking about as a reach out team as well through Pride, like making some reading lists available. I think Jamie's on the call. She had a really healthy list, which is awesome. It's something maybe, Connor, we could think about even making available if we could find a way to do that, because there's more books certainly that I've read, but some really cool examples. But you know, there's certainly a few moments, right, where, especially seeing it on film, or seeing some visibility of like you know, gay characters on film and things like that, still doesn't like get old for me, you know, because it's not like the normal thing, and it's kind of like cool or whatever. And you know, and obviously it hasn't been too long since like Ellen faced considerable backlash, right, in her coming out and things. So you know, some of the recent ones, and I know Roger, I think, talked about this too, but Pose, obviously, in FX, has some really what feel authentic and good programs, you know, about you know, things. I mean, I find myself being incredibly emotional when I watch that show. It just ended, but it's it's really good. And I guess a recent one that I watched, which again is incredibly emotional, that portrays, what it was like to live as a gay male, primarily in the UK through the AIDS epidemic. It's called It's a Sin. And gosh, man, I was, I shouldn't say man, I need to learn these things. It was so impactful and emotional. But Lindsay, what about you from your side?
So I have to be honest, I need to do better at watching films and reading books that LGBTQ community. One that really comes to mind right now is Transparent on, I believe it's on Amazon Prime, but it's about a father who transitions from male to female, and it's like the family story of how the children, I mean, they're grown children at this time, and I don't know, it's very emotional, but it's like lighthearted at the same time, and I don't know, it was really informative for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, oftentimes then I get a lot of questions when we're working kind of with the students about like just resources about a lot of things like race, about pride, about a bunch of different areas. So it's always great to hear more from some people that might have some resources like that. So I did write it down a question too. So and I actually got this question earlier when I was teaching this morning. So it's kind of cool to kind of circle back to it. So we're a lot of there's a good mix of students and employees and a lot of different people in this group, which is great too. But for the students here, students that are trying to find themselves and kind of going through those years of like middle school and high school and even college, what's a piece of advice that you can give to these students, or even even adults that are still trying to find themselves? What can you give to these people in terms of how to find themselves? Is there any recommendations? Anything you guys can mention? Kind of like being confident in themselves, I guess I would say.
I can start and talk about like what I do and have done. Um, over, I don't know, probably the last 3 years, I really concentrated on myself and finding who I am and what I want to do and where I want to be, like career wise and in my personal life and all of that. I spend a lot of time journaling. I write down my feelings, and if I'm having, like, whether it's happy, sad, angry, whatever, like I write it down and get it out of my head, but also like I'm learning about myself by doing that. And I have a therapist, like talk through stuff with them. I mean, like that's life changing as well. Um, and then I have a very, very close group of friends that are willing to call me out when I'm being crazy, or celebrate with me when things are great, or be sad with me when I'm sad. Finding a really great friend group, somebody that you like truly connect like at the soul level, is very important.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. And yeah, I think like even being open about, these are things that we talk about in the reach out community too, being open about like mental health, substance abuse, other things. I mean, these things are prevalent, right? And speaking about them, being open about whatever that might look like for all of us. And, as you look at the data, our communities are impacted quite significantly, whether it's mental health and substance abuse. And that needs to be advocated. There's advocacy there in order to support people. And there's moments too that some of the more difficult times, in darker days, you can actually question at a fundamental level, like are you worthy of love and good things? And that sounds really kind of tough, but I think many of us have had those feelings. It's hard to articulate or actually say it out loud, especially in public. But I think what I would love to tell others, if anyone is feeling in that place, to let them know that they're very much, deserving of love and good things. And you know, obviously my hope is that is a part of our future. But when we're in those moments, it's hard to see or to the other side of it. It just is. And you know, again, I'm so fortunate where my life is now, but it doesn't come with, you know, a deep sort of understanding of the path that you know, we take, and also how to support others through their path as well.
Awesome. And then we'll give a chance for the attendees to ask any last minute questions. But I did have one more that I would like to ask. So, you know, I've definitely been able to see in my lifetime some really cool advancements and achievements in the LGBTQ communities. Do you guys have a particular favorite, you know, achievement or advancement, kind of like, you know, breaking down old policies, anything that like kind of strikes you as your favorite? I know it's kind of like maybe like a loaded question. So if you have one.
No, it's, I mean, I think I remember when Massachusetts legalized gay marriage, I cried. I totally cried because I was like, oh, wow, I can get married. You know, it's just like, you know, I would, again, I think I was single. I, you know, wasn't looking to get married immediately, but it was still like just the option was like really, really cool. And then it just felt like it was introduced as part of more of the mainstream. So like, you know, all the other sort of challenges of finding a partner and all those other things that all of us experience now, actually it's an option, you know, here in Massachusetts. And obviously that faced some backlash, right? And you know, obviously leading to some of, you know, the Supreme Court rulings, which of course were incredibly noteworthy for me in terms of those protections outside of Massachusetts. And I think of, you know, what the trans health and trans protections, where that stands. I feel like we're back in the dark ages a little bit in terms of, you know, we need to now, you know, advocate to get, you know, trans protections and trans health to the same place of where gay marriage is, at least in the U.S. And of course, there's so much work to be done globally, and you know, that's where we need to focus as well. But Lindsay, anything, anyone? I may have taken them all. Sorry. But
Yeah, you definitely took them all. I would like to echo everything that Kim said. And something that I've been looking at recently is, you know, like every country around the world really has different laws surrounding the LGBTQ community. There are some countries that still, like, you can be punished to, like, by death for being gay. And, you know, I just, something that I want to do in my lifetime is like help get like others to understand that it's not like you shouldn't be punished, you know. So I think that having equality all around the world would be great.
Oh, those are both amazing. Thank you guys so much. And with that, I think we're kind of nearing the end. I don't see any more questions coming in. So I'd like to give both of you guys a chance to, say any last pieces of advice, any last words to the attendees, anything you might want to kind of leave everyone with, and then we'll call it a day.
I just want to thank everybody for being here. And I want to encourage everybody to be yourself, love yourself, and just go in as 100% you.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. And you know, I think there's power in sharing the story. Obviously, it's vulnerable, and I will admit it's kind of nerve-wracking. You know, so, but you know, for many of you on the call, I am sure you have stories to share, and find, you know, safe audiences, and we're so, you know, fortunate to have this great event. You know, in order to share these stories, but please consider spaces where you could share your story, because I think we can learn from you in terms of your perspectives and what you care deeply about. And, you know, just echoing in terms of how we, you know, self-care and, you know, or caring for each other, and also joy, you know, I think it's certainly not a phrase that I coined, but, you know, could be acts of resistance in a lot of ways. And I love those phrases that you know, people share. And you know, how does one think about that work as connected to the advocacy, right? So it's just being who you are, and loving oneself and caring for oneself are important part of this, are important part of this work.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. And thank you to all the attendees for joining us today and talking or hearing our speakers talk and just being part of the discussion. So I hope everyone has a great day and have a happy summer and have a happy Pride Month.
All right. Happy Pride, everyone.
Happy Pride.